Why would anyone refuse a COVID-19 vaccine? Today's lesson is all about vaccine hesitancy. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and welcome to Plain English Lesson 388 on August 9th, 2021. JR is the producer, and the full lesson is available at plainenglish.com/388. On that page, you'll find the transcript, the fast version, translations, the how-to video, exercises, and much more. As you know, we use current events and trending topics to help you upgrade your English, and there is no topic trending more strongly than the Delta variant, the new version of the coronavirus spreading through the unvaccinated population. In many parts of the world, people are not vaccinated because there aren't enough vaccines there. But in many other areas of the world, including in the US, some people have chosen not to get the vaccine. That's called vaccine hesitancy. And on today's lesson, we'll talk about the reasons people have for not getting vaccinated. Now, don't shoot the messenger. That means don't blame me for vaccine hesitancy. I got my vaccine at the earliest possible moment. But it is important, I think, to understand the reasons people have for making a different choice. So with that disclaimer in mind, let's dive in. It was one of humanity's great success stories. Less than a year after a deadly new virus broke out, multiple independent scientific teams developed a series of highly effective vaccines. The vaccines promise to cut short or eliminate the deadly impact of COVID-19 with minimal side effects. There was always going to be a shortage of vaccines early on as production ramped up and people clamored to get their protection. But in some corners of the world, there is a much different kind of shortage, a shortage of individual arms to inject the vaccine into. The reluctance to get a vaccine is called vaccine hesitancy. It is hard for many people to imagine refusing a vaccine against this deadly virus. It's especially hard on the many doctors and frontline workers around the world that are still not sufficiently protected. But vaccine hesitancy is real, and today's lesson is about why people don't want to get inoculated. First, let's start more generally. Even before COVID-19, more and more people around the world were refusing vaccines. Many people chose not to get the annual flu vaccine because they questioned its effectiveness. There is also a large community of people that believe there's a link between vaccines in children and autism, though that has been disproven. In Japan, many people today are skeptical of vaccines after an experience in the early 1990s. At the time, some data suggested that a vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella caused another not-so-great disease called meningitis. No link between the two was ever proven, but the Japanese government stopped administering the vaccine, and that was enough to make many people believe that vaccines cause disease rather than prevent them. It must be said, too, that the medical establishment has not always treated all people fairly and equally. Here in America, there is distrust of the medical establishment among minority communities due to historical injustices. Some people are genuinely afraid of being used as part of an experiment. That's not happening now, at least not in the Western world, but that fear is not totally unjustified based on history and what some communities have endured in the past. So these examples show that some of today's vaccine reluctance predates this pandemic. However, much of it is unique to this pandemic, and there are several reasons why people are reluctant to get vaccinated against COVID-19 specifically. The first reason is distrust of the government that administers the vaccine. In America, for example, the vaccination rates are different depending on political party. In some rural counties, which are more likely to be Republicans, less than a third of the population is vaccinated by choice, despite pleas from doctors and medical experts. Many people simply don't trust vaccine information because they don't trust the party in charge of the federal government, or they just don't trust government institutions, including government doctors. About half of Americans are not fully vaccinated. This is an even bigger problem in countries where governments have a long history of deception. Russia, for example, approved the world's first COVID vaccine. In fact, they export the vaccine to other countries. But only 13% of Russians are vaccinated, and 62% of Russians say they don't want the vaccine. A large reason for this is trust in their government to act safely and in the best interest of their citizens. Early in the pandemic, Russian, Indian, and Chinese vaccines were not subjected to the same kind of rigorous regulatory studies and approval processes as Western vaccines were. A second related reason for distrust is the speed with which the vaccines were developed. Vaccines often take several years to create, test, and approve. Some diseases, including HIV, still have no vaccine. Within a year, though, the world had a vaccine against this coronavirus. Many people think a safe vaccine could not have been developed so quickly. Their view is that pharmaceutical companies and governments are still testing the vaccines out, and they don't want to be a guinea pig or a research experiment. Some people think the dangers of COVID-19 are exaggerated. There has been a lot of suffering and death because of COVID-19, but it's also true that not everyone that catches COVID-19 has bad symptoms. Many people know 3, 4, or even 5 friends that have gotten COVID and experienced no symptoms. So they might just think it's not a big deal. They might think that they are healthy and strong overall, so they can handle a virus like this, and they simply don't need a vaccine. So why else would people be reluctant to get a vaccine? Some are simply afraid of the needle and the potential side effects. Many people experience side effects such as fever, chills, headaches, and pain. And this is no fun. But this pales in comparison to the risk of actually getting COVID and possibly dying. But people sometimes act irrationally when they have fears like this. There's one more big reason for vaccine hesitancy, and that is what's called apathy. People just don't think it's worth it, so they don't act. They may not be against it, but they don't see the urgency in getting it, so they haven't made the appointment yet. Out of all of the reasons for vaccine hesitancy, this is the trickiest. That's because as more and more people get vaccinated, there will be fewer and fewer cases. As there are fewer cases, the urgency for the unvaccinated to get the shot goes down. Therefore, a lot of people now think that COVID is going away, so they simply don't need to get the shot anymore. Some also think that they might need to get multiple shots in the future if the pandemic continues, so they'll just get one later when they feel like it. I got my Pfizer vaccine the first day I could. I was refreshing the page on my phone to try to find appointments. I was willing to go anywhere at any time to get the shot. I am in awe of the scientific research needed to develop this vaccine, and on the business side of things, of the supply chain and logistical considerations needed to produce this vaccine. I'm proud of the American companies involved in this critical process and of the American government's early leadership in jumpstarting the development. It's hard for many people to admit, but this was a bright spot at the end of Donald Trump's unpredictable presidency. So I think everyone should get this shot if it's available. I see the hospitalizations in America, almost all among unvaccinated people. And I just feel despair and frustration because here are doctors and nurses in America reliving the pandemic, the ventilators, the PPE, the overtime shifts, the death, the exhaustion. Only this time, all the patients are people who have voluntarily not gotten a free vaccine. However, it is also important to understand and have some empathy for the reasons some people are hesitant, even if we don't agree with their decision. And researching this lesson did definitely help me take a deep breath and understand a little more about people who've made a different choice and where they're coming from. Today, we have a great English expression for this audience because it's a common expression and you would probably not guess its meaning. The expression is pale in comparison. Pale, in this case, is a verb. We use this when we're making, of course, comparisons. And here's when we use it. We use it when we have something that seems big at first and then seems much smaller when compared to something bigger. So it seems big at first, then seems smaller when compared to something bigger. So earlier today, I was talking about the side effects of many coronavirus vaccines. The side effects are real for many people. They can include fever, chills, pain in your arm, swelling, nausea, and muscle pain. I had a slight fever, some chills, and difficulty sleeping the night after my second dose. And those are no fun. Nobody wants to get a fever, to be sore, tired all day. None of that. This seems terrible. But it pales in comparison to catching COVID-19. So think about it. Would you rather have one night of fever and a couple of days of muscle soreness? Or would you rather lose your sense of smell for a few weeks, be unable to work, possibly need to be placed on a ventilator, or die? Well, when compared to the symptoms of COVID itself, the side effects of the vaccine seem so much less terrible. So how did I use it? I first introduced the side effects of the vaccine, which seem bad when taken by themselves. I then said, but these pale in comparison to getting COVID. And when I say that, I mean to make the side effects seem less bad. So let's take a related example. COVID vaccines can be expensive. The US and Europe are paying about $15 to $20 per dose of the Pfizer vaccine. And they're giving these vaccines away for free to millions and millions of people. That's a lot of money. It's a big investment. But the cost of the vaccine pales in comparison to the cost of an economy-wide shutdown. So, if you're managing a government budget, which would you rather pay? Would you prefer to pay $20 a pop to get everyone vaccinated, on the one hand, or, on the other hand, hundreds of dollars a week in unemployment benefits, all the health care costs of treating symptoms, and all the other expenses of a shutdown combined? If you look at it like that, the cost of the vaccine pales in comparison to the cost of not giving everyone a vaccine. The cost of giving everyone the shot seems big at first, but it's actually small when you compare it to the cost of a national economic shutdown. Let's look at a new example. F9. Can you believe they're on the 9th Fast and Furious movie? It came out here in 2021 and earned about $500 million at the box office. Sounds great, right? $500 million is $500 million. But that pales in comparison to the biggest global box office hit from before the pandemic, which was Avengers Endgame. That movie earned $2.7 billion at the box office. That's 5 times the earnings of F9. So we'd say that the F9 box office take was good, but it pales in comparison to that of Avengers Endgame. We have a live conversation call a few times a month as part of Plain English Plus. On a recent call, we were talking about long-running TV shows. You might remember I talked about Law and Order, a popular TV show in the US. The first one came out in 1990, and its spin-offs are still on the air today in 2021. That's 31 years of Law and Order on American television. I bet that seems like a lot, right? But that pales in comparison to a daytime show called General Hospital. That has been on television since 1963. Can you believe that a single television show has had more than 14,000 episodes over 58 seasons? So yes, Law and Order has been on the air for a long time, but it pales in comparison to the daily General Hospital, which has been on television since 1963. Today's quote is from Theresa Tam, the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada. She says, "Misinformation or distrust of vaccines can be like a contagion that spreads as fast as measles." I think that's so true. It's easy to get scared. It's easy to believe something that's not true. It's easier to say no than to say yes sometimes when it comes to something new and scary. A lot of the misinformation makes people afraid, causes concern, gets their emotions running high, and the truth sometimes isn't as exciting. Ironically, in this case, I think the truth is more exciting than misinformation. The truth, the fact of this scientific development is a monumental achievement of science, business, and government. But regardless, here is the quote of the week. Misinformation or distrust of vaccines can be like a contagion that spreads as fast as the measles, says Theresa Tam, the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada. And that's all today. Thanks for joining us for lesson 388 of Plain English. Remember, all the fun continues at plainenglish.com/388, where you can continue to practice, take the quiz, try your hand at the dictation exercises, watch the video lesson, and much more. A lot of that is part of the Plain English Plus membership, but the transcripts are free. And if you're not yet a member, just log on to plainenglish.com and choose the membership level that's right for you. We'll be back on Thursday. See you then.